Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, we're going to talk about a topic. Let me go back for a minute. When I was young, one of my ambitions was to be an Indianapolis race car driver, maybe a great athlete. I think we all want to be that at some point of our life. But more importantly, I always wanted to be a pilot, to know what it's like to fly the friendly skies of United. And I'm not talking about United Airlines. But the reason for this particular episode and the reason that the universe brought this episode together was just that, being at the right place in the right time, and to really showcase a individual that we don't see in our space, in our color gender, and that's being a pilot. Today on the show, I'm blessed. Just call it what it is. Because as I was walking out of the studio, I ran into this young man, and we both ran into each other. And I remember asking him, like, what do you do? And he says, I fly airplanes. I said, what the fuck? That's exactly what I said. Like, what the fuck? Like, wow, this is something I always wanted to do. So I'd like to welcome to the show Captain Julian Prescod. No related to my boy Dad. I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan. Not related to Dad. I bet he wish he was.
Never that. Never that.
Welcome to the show, big guy.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Look at God.
The world works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
Tell the viewers a little bit about you before we get into your career, because this is really fabulous, because we don't see our kind flying major airlines.
Yeah. It's what I've wanted to do my whole life. I wanted to fly airplanes since I was probably 2 or 3 years old. And I set out for it early. My parents were a huge help, right? They supported my decision, and obviously it costs money financially to learn to fly. So my mom was always behind me. My dad, I can't even thank my dad enough for the financial support and the stuff he sacrificed for me to get there. But I started flying when I was 15 years old.
How did it even? I remember I said I wanted to be a race car driver, and I remember my mom would give me Mario Andretti cars and so forth. Did you get airplanes? Like, how did this even come about?
So I grew up in upstate New York.
Okay.
Rochester. Shout out to the Rock. And my house just happened to be on the departure end of the runways. They either be taking off over my house or landing over my house.
You didn't get much sleep, did you?
No, but airplane noise to me has always been fascinating.
Really?
So when I was a little kid and outside playing around with my friends, and the plane would fly over, either taking off or landing, I would stop, freeze, and look up at the sky.
Wow. And
I was just like, that's it.
That's all it took.
That's it. That's airplane noise. That's what I wanted to do since I was little.
How did you bring that to your mom and dad?
I just told them I wanted to be a pilot, and where I'm from, not that we grew up in the ghetto.
Right.
But we didn't grow up in a high-end area, right? So most people were either, you topped out at firefighter, you topped out at maybe police officer,
right.
And those were the guys that made it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Other than that, you were working at the little grocery store. You might become a manager or something like that. And both my parents, they're from Barbados, right? So,
really?
Yeah, so they're Caribbean, and they're island immigrants, and they demanded a lot from me growing up.
What do you mean when you say that? Because I think a lot of people that aren't immigrants, which we all here in the United States are immigrants, no matter how we look at it.
Yeah.
But when you say they demanded a lot from you, why do you think they said that? Because of their lifestyle?
Because of their lifestyle, they sacrificed a lot to move to the States.
Right.
And I knew that everything they gave me was a sacrifice, right? I don't take anything for granted. I went to private school, and that probably broke my parents, but they were like, you're going to have a better life than we had growing up. So when I said I want to be an airline pilot, it was like leaps and bounds above what they were expecting. And they were like, okay, that's what you want. What you got to do to get it. And we did it as a family.
Now that you look back about it, I know this is a hypothesis, but how much do you really think was invested in your career before you got your career, starting from acknowledging to your parents and then seeing the money that was allocated from the private schools, as well as now you got to go to flight school?
Yeah. That started at 4 or 5 years old. I had to show them through little things that I was serious about the big thing.
What did you do at 4 years old to start the little things?
You pick up your room.
Okay, the chores.
The chores you do. Okay. You pick up. You don't talk back to your parents. You pick up your room. You when you go to school, you show up on time. You do your work. 4 years old, 5 years old. That translates to 6, 10, 12, 15, 16, 18. You know, as I'm playing sports and I'm doing more stuff, you know, school is still number one. And I think by showing my parents I was serious about school, I was serious about my sports, I was serious about, you know, my chores, they were like, okay, we trust you enough to invest in you. Mm-hmm. Right. So it started at a very young age, man.
Were there ever any resentments from not from your family, because I'm sure it wasn't, but just from sometimes some of our family members can be haters too, as well as your inner circle?
Yeah, it wasn't really haters. It was more like those goals are too lofty. You're not going to be a pilot.
Don't that make you mad when people tell you some shit?
You're not going to be a pilot. You really want to be a pilot? You ain't going to be no pilot. You know what I'm saying? That and what drives me, what makes me upset with that is I'll go back to young kids in schools and invest in underprivileged schools, good schools, whatever. Right. And I do not like when I go to an underprivileged school and I hear the teacher say that. Oh, they ain't gonna be no pilots in here. Ain't nobody. Oh, I'm afraid of heights again. That drives me nuts.
Really?
Because if you are the one investing in our children and you don't believe in them, then we start in 10 steps back from the others. You know, and the others may be whoever you want to call them. But we are starting already at a disadvantage because our educators, those we look up to us, don't believe that this skin color should be flying airplanes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And that's me and you talked offset, and I found that to be true. I used to be a school teacher, and I remember, I'm older than you, but I remember even as far as elementary school, the only people that we was even compared to as far as a career that was still unattainable was law enforcement.
Yeah.
And you was still hard to get into that because the system wasn't designed for us to even reach that.
Correct.
How did you besides putting the work ethic in, what were the obstacles that you had to challenge as you got older and really started to seeing this career manifest? There had to be obstacles.
Yeah, of course there's always obstacles. Other than financial, right? Because there was times I was working, I mean, even in college, I was working 4 or 5 jobs at a time.
Right.
At a time. You know, I'd go to class in the morning, come back, work at the shoe store, come back, go to class, go to the mall, work at the clothing store, come back, go to the mall, or go to the hotel, and then at night I was working in a club, either as a DJ or a bouncer, right? So it was constant work ethic all the time. I'd say one of the biggest hurdles is you're looking for, and we as humans are looking for instant gratification, right? So you see the shiny object at the end. You see your goal, right? But it's a random Tuesday and it's 8 p.m. and you're exhausted and you're like, it's never going to happen. Yeah, like, how do I get there? Like, I don't see it ever happening in my lifetime. So sometimes your biggest hurdle is yourself. And I fought with myself a lot.
I was going to ask that. Did you have those moments where you was like, is it really going to be attainable?
Yeah. There was many nights in the library where you're looking or you're studying something and you're like, I don't see how this class that I'm taking or this subject that I'm studying or this test that I'm stressing about, how is this going to help me fly an airplane better? You know, and you could kind of, and a lot of people drop out. A lot of people drop out, and when you drop out, it just makes it better for the person that's still going because it's less competition. Right. So,
how bad was the competition?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge.
Is it competition for the ones that aren't us? Because how many of us are really? Many minorities are really sitting in those?
In aviation, the FAA put out in 2024, minorities are less than 4% of the total aviation population.
Why do you really think that, truthfully? I mean, this is your profession. Because let's get real. I don't hear no schools from aviation soliciting me, but I can hear thousands of colleges soliciting me to enroll in their school.
Yes.
So what do you think what do you think needs to happen?
Well, there's a couple things, right? So the 4% are minorities, so that would make 96% of them white folks, right? So a lot of their parents are pilots. There's generational pilots. A lot of them are military pilots, and like I said, I came from immigrants who were no pilots in my family.
Right.
You just had to break the mold. And that's what you have to just break the mold and be the first one, right? So that's one of the biggest disadvantages we have. And then two, like you said, you just don't see a lot of us.
Yeah.
So we just not, you see us playing basketball and you see us rapping, and you ask most of the young kids what you want to be. I want to be in the NFL, I want to be in the NBA, I want to drop a rap album. Right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because that's what they see, right? So if you don't know we are out there, then how do you know that might be something you want to do? And that is one of the biggest things that I'm trying to change. Is I'm trying to show, like, you look at me. If you just saw me, walk, you didn't. I guarantee you, your last guess was airline pilot when you saw me.
That wasn't true. I knew you was airplane pilot.
He lying.
No, I was like blown away.
Yeah. So we just not out there. We just don't. Like myself, you see me in regular clothes, man. I just don't fit the mold.
Right.
And I got a funny story for you.
Tell me.
I was flying for an airline, flying people, and I'm in the back. And when we ride in the back, it's called deadheading. That means the company is moving you from one spot to another spot, and they're going to buy you a seat to get to wherever you need to get to. So I'm deadheading. I got my headphones on. I got my hat on backwards. I had both my earrings in at the time. Had a Wu-Tang Clan shirt on.
Oh, you're thugging out.
Thugging it out, right? Just back there jamming the Jeezy or something I was back there listening to. And the flight attendant comes up and she's like, are you Captain Prescod? I was like, what? She's like, you Captain Prescod? I was like, yeah. I said, can you call crew scheduling? I said, okay. So I called scheduling. Hey, Captain, the captain for this flight is sick. Do you mind taking the flight? Do you mind flying the airplane right now?
What?
I said, I don't have my uniform. I'm in street clothes. They're like, oh, it's okay. Just get the plane. We just need to go. So I stand up, and all the passengers are like, what's going on? What's going on? And I walk to the front of the airplane, and I get in the captain's seat, and everybody's like, oh, hell no. I made an announcement. I said, hey.
Look, not snakes on the plane, brother.
Yeah. I said, look, I know I don't look like it right now, but I'm an airline captain. I'm the captain for this airline. The other captain's sick. We can go right now if you guys don't mind me flying like this out of uniform. Are you guys cool with that? Thumbs up if everybody's cool. I turned around. Everybody's like, shut the door.
Get out of here.
We land, and I'm standing, I'm getting my stuff up. I'm getting ready to leave, man. All the brothers, man. Hey, bro. Hey, I'm so proud of you, bro. I'm so proud of you, dog. Like, I didn't know you was a pilot, man. That's great. So, once they see stuff like that, it inspires them to go home and tell their kids, like, hey, man, this Wu-Tang cat flew the airplane today. You know what I mean? So, exposure.
Will you ever? Now I'm putting myself in the cockpit.
Yeah.
How was that first feeling to get behind something like a 747 or I don't know the names, but just I'm already tripping because when I'm sitting there and they go, you know what I mean? You got to lift this big old thing off the ground, dude.
Yeah.
And maneuver it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
that's a rush.
It's a rush. There's nothing like when you line up for and wait for takeoff, and they clear you for takeoff, and you advance that thrust lever forward, and those I got 3 engines on my airplane, and that thrust kicks in, and you kind of get pushed back in your seat, and you're steering. You're not steering like this now. Like, hey, you don't on the ground. You don't do this. You steer with your feet.
What?
Your feet there's a big thing on the back of the plane called a rudder. It goes like this, and this is what keeps you on the ground center. So you're steering with your feet. When you pull back, you're activating the rudder, and it's creating lift. But there's nothing, man. We flew up here 2 days ago, and it's just that
man, I want to do this.
And that rush is unbelievable.
Really?
Every single time.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you worry about the most? I mean, let's get real. You're in something really humongous.
Yeah.
You got people's lives at stake. Is there ever moments of fear? You can't really have fear, can you?
Well, I mean, to have fear is human, right? The biggest thing is that before every single flight, you prepare as if it's the most important event of your life, right? Because if you get, complacent or lackadaisical, that's when things can happen that you don't want to happen. So every single flight, my routine is an hour 20 prior, I start looking at what's called the flight release. It gives me the weather for where I'm at, the weather en route, and the weather where I'm going to land. Do I need alternate landing options in case the weather where I'm going is bad? I look at the aircraft that I'm flying. What's the maintenance history on it for the last 5 to 10 days? Are there things that have popped up repeatedly so that I am ready for it if it pops up? What's the load balance look like? How much stuff are we carrying with us? Do we have any hazardous materials that we're carrying with us? Who am I flying with? When's the last time they flew? Will they be tired when I meet them? There's a lot of things that go into the preparation for each and every individual flight.
So you do almost a 2 to 3 hour pre-check.
Yeah, it's about an hour and a half pre-brief before I even step foot to leave for the aircraft. And then when I get to the aircraft, there are a number of tests and checks that I do on the aircraft, right? The airplane essentially is a massive computer with a lot of different parts. You've got a hydraulic system, you've got a fuel system, you've got an electrical system, you've got a pneumatic or pressurization system. So each of these systems create the aircraft. So when I get to the airplane, I check each system to make sure that system is up, running, and ready.
When you're dealing with complex issues, let's say the weather, we talked about the weather, that brought you here.
Yeah.
I'm usually thinking, when I came from, let's use an example, I came from Atlanta to Indianapolis, and the weather was horrible. And
Yep.
I remember the guy going so high above the weather,
Yep.
and it was just like, and he actually was going faster to make up for time.
Yep.
What are some of the things that you had to actually deal with? We know the glamorous part of it, but what are some of the things that you really have to deal with constantly?
Well, each flight is its own
Nightmare or adventure.
Each flight is its own separate book,
Okay.
right? So no two flights are ever going to be the same. The rules of flying are simple. You aviate first. You fly the airplane. I don't care if both engines are on fire, you still fly the airplane. You navigate. You're going to figure out where you're going, what's the safest place, and then you communicate. You talk to ground, you talk to the company, you talk to the other pilot, you talk to the passengers, you talk to the flight attendants. So each flight can be or is its own separate adventure. I could fly one flight and something terrible will happen, God forbid, and then land that airplane, the maintenance is working on it, and then I got to immediately go to another plane and fly another flight and forget everything we just dealt with.
What do you really like about this career? Now you got this career, you manifested.
Yep.
I can already tell that you love this.
I do. I love it.
What is it about it that really, now that you look back and see the sacrifices that was made from your parents to your time, and basically to never have anyone come up to you? Has anyone ever, outside of that one when you was flying, how long did it take for somebody to really come up and say, wow, I didn't think nobody could do what you're doing.
Happens all the time. I happen to have a baby face, and back when I started, it was even more baby face.
Right.
So that started early on. I'm proud of you. That's I will never get tired of that. Whether it be an older person, a younger person, I don't care if you're black, white, whatever. When someone comes up to you and looks at you and says, "Hey, you make me proud,"
Yeah.
that's always a good feeling. Yeah, it started pretty early.
Were there many, when you did get the opportunity, we talked about this, how many people were actually of our color were there actually flying? Captains and so forth?
Not a lot.
Really?
Not a lot. And it just makes me appreciate those that came before me. And I'm not talking, I mean, you start with the Tuskegee Airmen, right?
I was getting ready to say that, yeah.
That's where everyone starts. Those guys are,
Legends.
I mean, they're whatever above legends is, they're above legends, right? But then you've got those who were just one click above you, right? Those pilots that were the first at their airline, because we're not that far removed from the first black pilot at FedEx, or the first black pilot at United, or the first black pilot at Delta, or the first black female at, they're still here. You know, some of them, a few have passed away, but some of them are still flying, right? So you look at certain airlines, you're like, oh, they're the first black female. You can point to them. You can touch them because they're still flying the airplane. So it's not like, oh, back in the 1950s or no, they're still here. So the obstacles that those pilots went through, I'm so appreciative of, right? And the people behind me are appreciative of me, which is odd to me, because I'm like, but it is what it is.
When you go and you devote your time to going into these schools and shining light on possibility.
Yes.
What do some of the kids say to you?
Oh, the kids say crazy stuff, man. I always start with, guess what I do for a living.
What do they say? What are some of the things they come with?
Basketball,
Okay.
rapper, DJ. You play in the NFL. I don't know how anybody thinks I play basketball. I am probably 5'10", maybe.
Hey, Spud, what up, get it?
I mean, maybe 5'10". I might could touch net still. It's funny, some of the stuff the kids guess, and it's always the little quiet girl in the back who says pilot.
Really?
I don't know why it is. It's always that girl that's way in the back right corner who will be like, pilot. I'm like, you win the prize.
Right.
And I think you asked me what my favorite part about being a pilot is, and I don't think I answered you. When you get to do your hobby and get paid for it,
It's not work anymore, is it?
it's not work.
I say that all the time. I tell people all the time, it's not work.
Not work. And if you out there listening, if you find what you love and you get paid for it, it will never be work. And now I get to fly an airplane that probably costs $30 million to fly. I ain't got $30 million to pay.
You get to take it home
I don't get to take it home, but I get to play with a $30 million jet every time I go to work.
Yeah.
And if I didn't get paid to fly, guess what I would do? I would pay somebody to borrow their airplane to go fly. So you give me a high quality jet to fly, and then you pay me pretty well on top of that to do that. And I go from point A to point B, and then you pay for a limo and a hotel room for me to hang out for a couple of days.
Wow.
China, Australia, India, Paris, Liège, Italy, Dubai. I've been to all these different places. Hawaii. I've been Alaska. I've been to all these places, and you pay me to go there, and you pay for my hotel, and you pay for.
I'm glad we're road dogs, man. I'm rolling with you.
Cut
now.
it out. Cut it out. Cut it out.
What's it like to fly, like you said, like to Hawaii, these long destinations? Like, how the hell do you stay up?
Good question.
Autopilot?
Good question. So, yeah, there's a combination. So, if you fly over 7.5 hours, a normal flight is 2 pilots, a captain and a first officer. And a first officer is nothing more than a captain in waiting. That's what all my first officers. The only reason I'm a captain and they're a first officer is because I've been at the company longer. I have seniority. Captain, first officer, 2 pilots. Flight's over 7.5 hour. The company now says, you know what? It's a long flight. We'll give you 3 pilots. You captain, a first officer, and a relief officer. That guy's job is to you basically divide the time in 3, and you sleep for that, or you rest for that amount of time. Flight's over 11.5 hours. Now it gets really good. There's 4 pilots. That's a beautiful thing. That is a beautiful thing because you fly for 2 hours, you rest for 2 hours. You fly for 3 hours, you rest for 3 hours. However you want to divide the time up. But on our aircraft, we have catering, we have ovens, we have sleep bunks. We do have autopilot. So you're flying. The autopilot's usually on at cruise. And the other 2 guys are up there. You're back there. You're warming up your steak. You're warming up your potatoes. You've got all your Netflix movies downloaded. We got sleep bunks. You've got a way to get your bunk out so you can sleep and put up your little iPad. And now you're watching a movie while you're in bed. It's a beautiful thing, man. You get paid. Paid to sleep.
When you first start doing the longer flights?
Yep.
I'm trying to think, how do you, I guess you're just used to it. When you wake up knowing you're still in the air?
Yeah. The challenge with longer flights, obviously, if you're flying a longer flight, that means you're going to a further destination.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing you're fighting is time zones, right? Mm-hmm. So if I go from Memphis to, let's say, Memphis, Honolulu, Guangzhou, China, when I'm in China, if it's 12 a.m. there, it's 12 p.m. where I'm at back home. So it's a whole day difference, right? So trying to get adjusted to the time you're at, and each pilot has a different methodology of how they're gonna get their body on the right clock, right? So some guys sleep all day and they're up all night. Some guys just try to force their body to stay awake. I am a big proponent of sleep when your body tells you to sleep. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's not so much waking up and you're still in the airplane because you kind of know you're in the airplane. You're not in a deep sleep, like you're not in REM sleep where your body is unaware of where it's at. When I wake up, I know I'm in an airplane, and I'm the captain. So honestly, I'm always kind of one ear awake.
Okay.
Because if something goes down, they're gonna
wake you up anyway.
Yeah, and I tell the other pilots, hey, if something happens, come and get me, and they'll come and get you. It'd be something stupid. They're gonna come. Hey, captain, I don't want to. You're like, what? I just want to run this by you, and I'd rather that than them try to figuring it out by themselves.
And do you have kids?
I do. I have 2 boys, man. London, Chance, shout out, 13 and 11.
What do they think about their dad? You got to be the real superhero in the house, man. Get real.
It's crazy, man, because I'm just dad when I come home, right? The thing about being a pilot and having kids is your kids don't really see what you do, right? I live in Atlanta. I'm based in Memphis. So when I leave home, I drive to the airport in Atlanta and then I go to Memphis and that's where I start work. Mm-hmm. So my kids, they just know daddy disappears for some time and comes back home. And then it's back to like football practice, lacrosse practice. You never thought about
taking them on the plane, baseball practice, get on there and let them see you in action?
They do. As my kids are getting older, Chance, he's 11, London's 13. They're asking more questions now. And obviously with YouTube and social media and FaceTime, I'm never too far removed from my kids. You know what I mean? Right. And mom's at home holding it down. So, I just YouTube. This is daddy's airplane. This is me taking off and me landing and stuff like that. So I think the younger one is starting to get a little bit more into it.
What do you want to see change in your profession? Like I said, first of all, let me say thank you for taking the time,
of course,
to come and share this information and allow the viewer, especially the young viewers, to know, hey, anything is possible, man. Anything is possible.
Of course.
But to know that the role that you took, what do you want to give back to the people?
Man, I want, if you have a desire, if you have an inkling, if this is kind of what you want to do or you think you want to do it, reach out, man. We've got an organization called OBAP, stands for the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. Go to the website. It's either obap.com or obap.org, but just Google OBAP. If you think financially you can't do it, there is many a scholarship opportunity, many a grants. The military, we haven't even spoke about the military, but the military is a great way to have the government pay for your pilot's license. And I'm not saying you don't have to go active duty Air Force or active duty Navy or Marines, although that's a great way to go. You can go reserves, you can go guard. There's a lot of different ways to do it. So I would just like to have younger people understand that the opportunity is there, and don't let anybody tell you, oh, you can't be a pilot. Even if you don't know a pilot, there's always a way, especially now with the advent of social media and Google. And I mean, there's a way. You know, if you can't find a pilot, you don't want to find a pilot.
What were some of the things that curriculum that you have to really master in? Because clearly you got to have some things in your career that you have to be good at. But what are some of the things that are definitely must to be a pilot?
The basics. And this was the hardest part for me growing up, because I knew I wanted to be a pilot. I would daydream and stare out the window at airplanes from high school, and I would think, why am I taking earth science? Why, like, this has nothing to do with flying an airplane. Why am I taking Spanish 103 or 104 or 201 or whatever it is? And I will tell you, those basics matter. I wish I was better in Spanish, because when I fly to Spanish speaking countries,
you only know 3 words.
Mantequilla is butter. No, mantequilla is butter. Por favor is please, and el baño is bathroom, right?
Right.
But had I paid attention to Doc Sara, I probably would have been a little bit better. The big ones are physics, math, because just like when you're driving an airplane, or just like when you're driving a car, you may not even realize it, right? When you're driving, you see that car, those brake lights ahead of you come on, you start braking, and you're doing a whole bunch of math calculations in your head, and you don't even realize it. It's just natural to you at this point, right? Like, okay, so if I'm at 39,000 feet and I need to be at 10,000 feet in this distance, right? It's math calculations. If I'm burning this amount of fuel, I'm burning 15,000 pounds of gas an hour, and I've got 2 hours left in my flight, and they're asking me, are you going to make it? It's mental math, right? So math is big. Physics is big. That earth science even came into play with, what kind of runway am I landing on? Is it asphalt? Is it concrete? Is it porous? All that stuff.
That makes a difference upon the landing.
It does. It makes a difference on braking action.
Really?
You know, if it's raining and it's wet, what kind of surface are my tires hitting? How heavy is my aircraft? How much stopping distance will I need?
Wow. You know, I didn't even think about all that.
Yeah. How much takeoff distance will I need? Where's the wind coming from? Right? We always try to take off into a headwind because it creates lift. You don't want to take off with a tailwind. But it's, you know, if the winds are coming 90 degrees from the right or the left, how much crab angle do I need? How much rudder input do I need? How much aileron input do I need? There is a lot of things happening mentally and calculated, that every single flight, you just take, and if you're in the back and you're just sitting there watching your movie and eating your peanuts and you drinking your soda, plane takes off and lands safely 99.9999999% of the time.
Really? You know? I got a few more questions before we wrap up.
I want to talk to you on your parachute question. You asked me.
Go ahead. Yeah. What was my question? I said, why don't we have parachutes?
Why don't you just give parachutes to every passenger? Solid question. Not really. For many reasons. Let me ask you a question. Where do you think most accidents happen in aviation? At what phase of flight?
Takeoff?
Yep. And?
Landing?
Correct. Takeoff and landing. How high are you off the ground on takeoff and landing?
Maybe less than 1,000 square feet.
You're on the ground. You're on the ground when you take off and land. So if I'm taking off and something happens, you gonna have time to get to the door, jump out, pop a parachute, and have it open, and then land safely?
No.
Landing, same thing, right?
Right.
Very rarely are there any accidents at cruise. Up up at altitude, 39, 35, 37, 36,000 square feet. Very rarely do you have those accidents. Few times you've had a couple pressurization issues in the 80s. I think Aloha Airlines had the top of the airplane blow off. Everyone landed safely. I think maybe one casualty. But most accidents happen on takeoff and landing. Those are the most dangerous parts of flying for us. For takeoff, you've got the engines at a high velocity, and they're screaming essentially. A lot of, that's where you can have your engine failures, engine fires. You can suck birds.
I meant to ask that. Like, how often do birds?
Birds are a big deal, man. Birds are a big deal. A lot of the airports have these cannons throughout the airfield, and you'll hear them going off. Boom, boom. Sounds like mortar fire. And what they're doing is they're scaring the birds away.
Okay.
They scare the birds. I've been flying a long time, man. I know I look young, but I've been flying for a long time. Since 2006 professionally with an airline.
Right.
And I've had 2 incidents where I've hit birds. 2.
What happened?
The first one, coming into land, we hit a flock of geese, and they just beat up what's called the radome, or the front of the aircraft, the nose. That's where the weather radar sits. And that front part of the nose, the pilots sit here, and then you see like the curved part. That's where the radar sits, and it kind of sweeps back and forth. The birds hit that section, damaged the radar. And then
don't they see you coming?
You would think so. You would think so. And then the second time over Milwaukee, I had a bunch of birds hit the windscreen, cracked the windscreen.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. That windscreen is thick. It's actually about 4 different windscreens. So if one breaks, the outer layer shatters. It's just one layer that's shattered. So it shattered the outer layer. We came back and made an emergency landing in Milwaukee.
What usually happens if that does happen? Like, what does it affect outside of just the landing? Like,
that's just visibility for the pilots.
Okay, so you got to land.
You got to land, yeah. And it depends on where the birds hit. If it hits the engine, sometimes the engines will just suck them out, and they'll keep spinning. It'll be fine. Sometimes you'll be forced to shut the engine down, come back and land.
But you can fly a plane with
0 engines. If you're at cruise, if you're at 39,000 feet, and both engines for some reason flame out, the airplane now becomes a big glider, and it'll still fly. It'll just slowly start to lose altitude. But the altitudes we fly at, and especially over the U.S., at any given point, I've got 7 or 8 airports I can land at. Mm-hmm. So you flame an engine out, you flame 2 out. In my case, you flame 3 engines out. There's ample time to figure out, okay, where do we want to go? There's ample time to call the company. Hey, we lost all 3 engines. What airport suits you better for either passenger exchange or freight exchange? It is not a.
How difficult is it to land?
To land a period?
Like, if that did happen, how difficult would it be to land?
This is where your math comes in. This is where your math comes in, right? So, at what point do I need to be at that runway? What's my velocity? What's my speed? What's my altitude?
Right.
It's not difficult. It becomes we train every 6 months in the simulator for these kind of situations. Every 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up,
yes, sir.
Let's talk about the females. Let's give the females some credit. Every person of color.
Yep.
How many females do we have?
Well,
do your math.
Well, not a lot. Not a lot. At the airline I'm at, we have 3. We have 3. 3 out of a bunch of thousand. We have 3. So,
are there any female captains?
At my airline, one of them. There's one female captain. Okay. And she holds it down.
Really?
She holds it down. And not even of color, man. Any female pilot in general, I salute them. These are moms, wives, daughters, and their journey is just as difficult sometimes as our journey, whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Latina. And the reason being is because when you get there, you're looked upon as you were only here because of your skin color. Mm-hmm. You're only here because of your gender. You're only, and that's the tough part. because you like, damn, I know damn well I'm a better pilot than you. And we can go toe to toe on any kind of scenario. I will outfly you any day of the week. I'm confident in a lot of things, right? I'm confident in being a dad. I'm confident in being I want to say I'm the best pilot in the company.
Why not?
Right?
Yeah, you should.
Because I can fly the brakes off of my airplane. I'm an instructor on my airplane. I'm a check airman on my airplane. I teach people how to fly my airplane. And I am super confident in my abilities to get that airplane down in any scenario safely. Right? So, can we cuss on this?
You can do anything you want to do.
Shit on my airplane. Facts.
Before we wrap up, once again, allow me to say thank you so much.
Of course,
and
man.
To at least allow me the opportunity to see a person of my color doing some remarkable things. And,
Thank you.
And teaching individuals. Speaking of teaching individuals, you say you do teach individuals. How can they reach out to you for lessons?
Well, okay. So if you get a lesson with me, you all are already hired at my airline, and I'm training you on my aircraft. As far as like you're beginning and you're starting to fly, I used to be a certified flight instructor and an instrument instructor and a multi-engine instructor. Those planes are called GA, general aviation. They're much smaller. I don't do that no more. That's for y'all young people. But I am able to get you in contact with an instructor in your area. And I'm more than happy to give out my information. If you want to reach out to me, it's Julian, Julian Prescod, Prescod @gmail.com. You can reach out to me, shoot me a message, tell me where you live in the country, and we will link you up with somebody that can get you in the air. Like I said, OBAP is great for people of any race, color, and creed. There are things called discovery flights where we'll give you your first flight for free. You can get up to the air and figure out if you even like it. But julian.prescott@gmail.com. Send me an email, and I will make sure to either connect you or take care of you myself. And that's one way.
Lead the viewers with that beast mindset that you clearly got. That way they can be inspired, just like even listen to this story.
Yeah, man. Listen, I don't let anybody tell you what you can or can't do. Don't let anybody put a cap, a top, or a limitation on who you will be in life. If you want to be a pilot, be a damn pilot and be the best pilot out there. You want to be an astronaut, be an astronaut. You want to be a mechanic. You want to be the president of the United States of America. You do that. Do not let anybody ever tell you that you cannot do it. And I don't care if you've never seen anyone around you do it. You be the first to break the mold.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.